Hello and welcome back, third grade scientists. This week you are still studying Unit 4, Weather and Climate. So let's take a look at some of the vocabulary words you will be encountering in this week's lessons. We will review together the academic and content vocabulary for this unit of study this week. We will study the word meanings, look at examples to help you understand the work you will be doing during your science lessons this week. Let's get going. A quick review of the difference between academic and content vocabulary. Remember, the academic words come from your questions and focuses for the lessons. These are words that can be found across all your subject areas. Your content words are going to be specific to the lessons this week, so they will all have to do with weather and climate. Let's take a look at this week's academic vocabulary. These are some of your lesson objectives from this week's lessons. One of them is, today you will be able to gather and communicate information about a region with a different climate than your own. You'll see that the word communicate is in red. That's a word we will take a closer look at. Today you will be able to relate the causes of an extreme weather condition to its destructive effects. You see the word relate highlighted in red, as well as cause and effect. We will also take a deeper dive into those words. Before we move on, stop and take a moment to think about whether or not you've ever heard these words before in any other lessons, any other subject areas, or anything that you've read. Do you think you could explain what they mean? Can you think of any examples of these words? Communicate was our first word. Communicate is a verb or an action word. It means to make known or exchange thoughts and ideas. Another word that means the same thing is to inform or to talk. So whenever you're talking with someone, having a conversation, letting them know what you're thinking and they're letting you know what they're thinking, you are communicating. There are many different forms of communication. We can communicate verbally, non-verbally. We can communicate through writing, through technology, through text messages, through FaceTime calls, through phone calls, or through face-to-face conversations. Let's take a look at an example of what communication is. Here you see a picture of two people speaking their ideas or thoughts to one another. This is an example of communication. Relate. Relate is also a verb. It means to see or to find connections between. Another word that means the same thing is to link or associate. So when you find connections or similarities between things, you are relating them. For example, whenever you're putting together a jigsaw puzzle, you are making relationships or relating the pieces to one another. Do the patterns fit together? Do the shape of the pieces fit together? Putting together a jigsaw puzzle is a really good example of making relationships or relating one thing to another. Another thing you'll look at this week is cause and effect, the relationship between a cause and its effect. The effect is the result or what happens, but the cause is the why or the reason that something happened. So for example, you could have rain as a cause, and the effect or the result of that rain could be a rainbow. It could be puddles on a street or a large amount of water, or it could be flowers growing. Rain causes all of these effects to happen. In order to identify cause and effect relationships, you can look for clue words like so, since, this is why, cause, result, therefore, in order to, it leads to, if, and then. Cause is the reason why something happens. Effect is the result. Let's take a look at the content vocabulary. Let's take a look at some of the important content words for this week's lessons. These are some words you will learn about during your lessons this week. You will see the word region, equator, hazard, and drought. Before we move on to take a deeper dive into these words, take another moment and stop to think about whether or not you have ever heard or read these words somewhere before. What do you think they mean? Can you think of any examples? Region. Region is a noun. A region is an area of the Earth's surface that has certain features of land and climate. Let's look at an example. Here's an example of a climate region map. So you notice that different regions on the map are highlighted in different colors because there is something in common with the climate and the land features of that region, whether it be very cold there all the time, very warm and hot there all the time. Those parts of the land on the earth have things that are in common. Equator. Equator is also a noun. Equator is the imaginary circle around the earth that is halfway between the north and south poles. So if you drew an imaginary line around the globe or around the earth, that would be the equator, cutting the earth into two poles, the North Pole and the South Pole. You may have seen it on globes and maps. If we could imagine it actually being drawn on the earth, this is what the equator would look like. Hazard is also a noun. A hazard is something that causes danger or risk. For example, in a store or on a road, you may have seen a sign that looks like this. This is called a hazard sign. If you're shopping in a store and somebody spills something, an employee may put up a sign near that spill to warn other shoppers that there's something dangerous on the floor that could cause them to fall and get hurt before it's cleaned up. This sign warns you of a hazard or something dangerous. A banana peel on the floor could also be something hazardous or causing danger. A banana peel on the floor is a hazard. If you step on it, you could slip and fall. Drought is also a noun. A drought is a long period of time with little or no rain. This is an example of what the land in an area might look like during a drought. So at first glance of this picture, it may just look like a pretty walkway leading to somewhere, but it's actually not. That's actually dirt and plants that have become so brown and cracked and dried from lack of water that they're having a hard time surviving. So this is what the land could look like when it does not get enough water for a very long period of time. These were some awesome words around weather and climate. And now that you're familiar with these awesome words, you will be able to use them and understand them during your learning this week. Keep up the great work, third grade scientists.